Hello and welcome to Northwest NEWSWEEK. The three MPs here in the Northwest are reacting to some controversial comments made by Federal Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault last week. Guilbeault told the Montreal Gazette, quote, "There will be no more envelopes from the federal government to enlarge the road network." He's since backtracked on that, and fellow Cabinet Minister Patty Hajdu says her government will continue to support new road infrastructure in the region. Lee Noonan has more.
The federal Liberals have come under fire for a comment made by Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault, who said there would be no more funding from Ottawa to enlarge Canada's road network. Kenora Conservative MP Eric Melillo says with frequent accidents and closures, the Trans-Canada Highway needs to be twinned, and he says it is, quote, extremely concerning the government will no longer be funding new roads. However, Guilbeault has since walked back his comments.
We still have funds, obviously, to maintain and enhance our road network across the country. But I was talking specifically about projects like the Troisième Lien that the CAQ government in Quebec wants to move forward with.
According to Guilbeault, his initial comment was in reference to major urban centres where investments could be made instead on green transportation infrastructure like passenger rail. That's something Thunder Bay Rainy River MP Marcus Pulowski says he's a big fan of.
I think the government quite rightly wants to be putting more resources into those kind of environmentally friendly forms of transportation, which, being from a place which produces most of the mass transit cars in Canada, I'm certainly in favor of. But the reality is in Northern Ontario, we're going to be dependent on the cars for a while.
Patty Hajdu, Minister for FedNor and Indigenous Services, says the ongoing work to build twinned or 2+1 lane highways is key to road safety in this region.
I want to reassure all Northern Ontarians that we continue to have our eye on investing in transportation routes in Northern Ontario that includes roads.
Meanwhile, Hajdu says she's in active conversations about possible construction of an all-season road network connecting remote First Nations.
The ice road season is getting shorter and shorter and precarious at that. And so, for example, if we're going to be building up infrastructure in First Nations, and the infrastructure gap is huge. So communities need new schools, they need new community centers, housing is aging and needs to be either renovated or replaced. Well, all that takes stuff, and stuff has to get up to those communities, and transporting stuff by air is extremely expensive.
With long distances and challenging terrain between the isolated First Nations in the region, Hajdu says the construction of an all-season road network would mean a massive investment. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
MPP Lise Vaugeois is putting pressure on the Ford government at Queen's Park to do something to help reopen the Terrace Bay pulp mill. The pulp mill was idled in early January, putting hundreds of people out of work. The NDP member for Thunder Bay Superior North questioned Natural Resources Minister Graydon Smith this week about the situation.
And nothing has happened to slow down the potential social and economic collapse of these communities. There are 500 direct lost jobs, but 1,900 jobs at risk throughout the region. Given that the owners of the mill won't communicate beyond saying they will entertain offers of purchase, I'm wondering what update the government can share with these workers about their plans to address this issue.
We are leaving no stone unturned to find a way to get this mill back open, whether it's with the current owner or whether it's with another operator. We know that the future of forestry in Northern Ontario still remains bright. We will find ways to get over this hurdle and continue to make Northern Ontario the strong powerhouse that it deserves to be.
Unsafe passing tops the list of safety concerns for truckers traveling highways 11 and 17 in the north. The Ontario Trucking Association recently released a result of a survey in which nearly all respondents identified persistent safety concerns when driving through Northern Ontario. Lee Noonan has the details.
The Ontario Trucking Association polled truck drivers and fleet operators in the province about highway safety in the north.
A vast majority, 96%, said, look, as professional drivers and fleets operating in the north, we do have, some concerns about some issues up north, particularly on highways 11 and 17.
The survey asked truckers to identify safety concerns and possible solutions. The top concerns were unsafe passing and a lack of rest areas, with roughly 84% of respondents saying they're concerned with the passing behaviors of other drivers. The rest of the top 5 included poorly trained truck drivers, a lack of safe passing areas, and unsafe trucking fleets. In a virtual tie, the top 3 solutions were increasing the number of passing and climbing lanes, increasing the number of rest areas, and better training for truck drivers, with 79% of respondents suggesting those fixes. The truckers also want to see more oversight for unsafe fleets and more heated washrooms for drivers.
Our goal is to take what we've learned from this and sit down with our road safety partners, the government of Ontario, and a number of other folks over the course of 2024, and start to figure out how we address some of this stuff.
Wood is adamant that the government and OPP have been good partners in road safety, but says the effort to make highways safer for truckers is an evolving process. Meanwhile, Thunder Bay Superior North MPP Lise Vaugeois has been a vocal critic of the government's track record on northern highways. She was recently joined in Thunder Bay by the NDP leader, Marit Stiles, to promote her party's solutions, which also include more rest stops and passing lanes and improvements to driver training.
Require that commercial driver training schools are audited at least every 2 years and that the auditors themselves are fully trained. Require that the people teaching drivers are certified as driver trainers. That's not the case right now. Increase the number of hours of training to match the recommendations of experienced drivers in the field.
While Vaugeois' training recommendations relate mostly to enforcement and accountability, Woods wants the government to start paying for driver training.
It's no different than, government supports that would be afforded to other trades, whether it's, carpenters, electricians.
Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Thunder Bay's 2 MPPs are reacting to the Ford government's decision to scrap the LCBO's plan for controlled entrances at 6 of their stores in the Northwest. The agency announced the plan last week, but then suddenly retracted it a few days later after the government intervened. Jonathan Wilson reports.
But from my basic understanding, it was just to make sure that privacy issues weren't a concern.
MPP Kevin Holland says he's looking to learn more about his government's decision to put the brakes on the LCBO's pilot project for controlled entrances. Government officials had concerns about customers' IDs being scanned before they enter as a way to reduce robberies and shoplifting. The pilot would have involved 4 liquor stores in Thunder Bay, along with ones in Kenora and Sioux Lookout.
Why specifically in Thunder Bay? It's a pilot project that has to start somewhere. So we have been receiving requests from LCBO vendors throughout the province with regards to enhanced safety measures at their facilities. So the province has listened to those vendors and put together a program to meet the needs and what we are hearing from the vendors.
LCBO officials released a diagram of the new controlled entrance system. Customers would enter the exterior door and present their ID to security personnel at the vestibule. Their name, date of birth, and photo would then be uploaded to a secured database. If the customer is of age and has not been banned from the store, the interior door then opens to that customer one at a time. Local NDP member Lise Vaugeois says she's glad the plan was halted based on privacy concerns.
Those are questions that should have been addressed before it was even put on the table. Privacy is a big concern. Do we want to have it tracked every time we already know that when you use a card to buy something, we're being tracked. Everything's being tracked. But nevertheless, this is a privacy issue to have to show ID when you go into a place of business.
Vaugeois points out this is yet another major reversal by the Ford government, and she questions the LCBO's rationale for targeting this region with the changes.
A lot of people don't have ID. And that really makes me wonder, well, who was it that they were trying to keep from coming into liquor stores? I am glad to see that it's been walked back, that it's been retracted, because people shouldn't be criminalized for going into a business and purchasing whatever it is, in this case purchasing alcohol. There was no reason for it.
The LCBO says the agency remains committed to working collaboratively on additional measures to reduce theft and violent incidents in their stores and ensure safe experiences for their customers and employees. Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
The federal government has committed $13 million for a temporary school in Admatung First Nation. That comes after the devastating fire that destroyed the John C. Yesno Education Center last month. It left nearly 300 students between kindergarten and grade 9 without a school. Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu admits the timelines will be tight if they want to get the modular unit up the ice road and students ready for the fall.
It is a matter of weeks. The work has begun. I have to really compliment Yabatung Council and the technical experts at Matawa who worked really hard together to get us a quote that was pretty detailed, and so we've approved that quote. Now it's a matter of just getting the logistics sorted to capitalize on the ice roads that remain. Obviously, there is some contingency funding for any kind of airlift that might have to also support those transfers of modular units.
Haidu says a design phase for the permanent school is already underway. She estimates it could take up to 3 years to complete once construction begins. Meanwhile, Anishinaabe Nation has declared a state of emergency as warm winter weather has left many winter roads unpassable. The situation impacts up to 30 isolated First Nations that are dependent on the winter roads for transportation. And they're asking for immediate support to help transport essential goods. Once again, here's Lee Noonan with more.
The chiefs of Anishinaabe Nation have declared a winter road state of emergency. They voted during their winter assembly, which just wrapped up in Thunder Bay. They're calling on both federal and provincial governments to subsidize air transport of essential goods.
If you can't truck anything in, you have to fly it in, and that's way more expensive than just using the road, and that's where we will need Ontario and Canada to step up and support our communities that have to fly in fuel and any other materials for this upcoming year.
Federal Minister of Indigenous Services, Patty Haidu, says she's committed to Fiddler that the funding will be there to transport essentials like food, fuel, and medical supplies, but says that moving construction materials and heavy equipment will be the real challenge.
Things that we know we're going to need, communities are going to need to build housing, to build community centers, to build new schools, to build fire halls. And that's the real risk here. I think we can all manage to get people the very basic essentials that you need for life. But what we're trying to do together is to try to ameliorate some of the infrastructure gaps that were really plaguing communities. And winter roads are an essential part of that work.
The winter road season has always varied, but until recently, it was expected to last roughly from January through March. But as of now, the roads are completely impassable for most of the 30 NAN communities that depend on the winter road network. For 10 of the communities, the roads are open to light traffic, but not to heavy transports.
It's really late now in the winter road season, and typically by now we would have heavy trucks with housing materials and fuel going up, but because of just how warm it's been and the ice thickness isn't there, that they're holding and waiting and hoping that there'll be some cold weather.
Fiddler says communities are all hoping for a drop in temperatures, but that some aren't confident the winter roads will be open at all this year. In the long term, Fiddler says a number of NAN communities are now looking into the construction of all-season roads. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
We'll have more from the NAN Chiefs Assembly coming up after the break.
There needs to be immediate intervention that needs to happen now to support our communities, but at the same time working towards that longer transformation work that needs to happen.
NAN has also declared a health state of emergency, with communities reeling from an overwhelming number of deaths in recent weeks and months. Chiefs at the NAN Winter Assembly voted to establish a health service ombudsperson to investigate the healthcare barriers and advocate with every level of government. Lee Noonan reports.
Several communities across Anishinaabe Nation are in mourning following a spate of deaths over the course of the winter. First Nations like Kitchener-Mekw-Sib-Ninewuk, where 9 people died in the span of a month. That's 1 in every 200 people in the small, tight-knit community. Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler says First Nations mental health and healthcare systems need a complete overhaul.
There needs to be immediate intervention that needs to happen now to support our communities, but at the same time working towards that longer transformation work that needs to happen.
Youth mental health is particularly high among the concerns raised by the chiefs at the Assembly. Fiddler says they've been in a perpetual crisis for at least 9 years, exacerbated by COVID, and calls the government response over those years inadequate.
I know there's been some progress that has been made. For example, we get programs and services, for example, Choose Life. But a lot of these programs and services do not come with capital or infrastructure. Now, we actually need to build buildings in our communities, for example, safe spaces for children and youth, so that they can operate 24/7, so that if a child's in distress, that they can actually go to a place that somebody will look after them.
Deputy Grand Chief Bobby Narcisse says following local leadership and respecting the diversity of NAN communities will be key in developing solutions that are proactive.
Looking at ways to really involve our culture, our languages, to look at ways to really overcome some of these challenges and also build resiliency within our youth, our children, our youth and families.
Treaty rights are another important issue on the table, particularly with cases like the $95 billion lawsuit that 10 Treaty 9 First Nations launched against the federal government in April. As other Treaty 9 First Nations consider joining the suit, Fiddler says NAN's role is to help keep their chiefs well informed. Coming up in the near future, NAN's holding a youth gathering here in Thunder Bay and sending a delegation to Edmonton for the National Assembly of Remote Communities February 21st to the 24th. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Kiiwetinoong MPP Saul Mamakwa was putting the Ford government on the hot seat this week. He says the province has yet to respond to that health state of emergency declared by NAN chiefs.
People are dying. This is the Ontario that I know. 2 weeks ago, the Anishinaabe Nation declared a health state of emergency across the whole north, not just on reserves. This government doesn't have the courtesy to respond when emergencies get declared. Speaker, Northern Healthcare should not operate in a state of emergency.
Perhaps the member opposite is not aware of the fact that, in fact, our Minister of Indigenous Affairs, our Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, and myself have all actively engaged in conversations and offered solutions and assistance to the people of Northern Ontario. But these expansions are something that I very much hope that you and your party will support when we put it in our budget.
A nearly 16-year-long project in Nipigon is finally making some major headway. The federal government recently awarded a $37 million project to Finway Contractors to build an administration and visitor center for Parks Canada at the Nipigon Marina. The announcement comes nearly 2 decades after Ottawa designated most of the area along the north shore of Lake Superior as a national marine conservation area. The new building will be Parks Canada's first ever to be built to net zero carbon standards with a 100-year service life and reduced energy requirements. Once completed, the facility will serve as Parks Canada's primary operations base and visitors reception for the conservation area. Nipigon Mayor Suzanne Kuko says the township has been waiting for this to happen for a very long time.
It was October 25th, 2007, when Prime Minister Harper was here at the Nipigon Marina and announced the establishment of this conservation area, and to now where we're getting an actual headquarters and a building in Nipigon. So it's very exciting.
When we have assets like this, investments from the federal government through Parks Canada, it allows that region to continue to be able to highlight the beauty of the region for visitors and for permanent residents.
Construction work will begin this summer at the chosen site, which is currently a large parking lot at the Nipigon Marina. The government says the building will be ready to open in 2026. With the El Nino weather phenomenon we've been experiencing and the result of the lack of snow this winter, some people are getting worried about the upcoming forest fire season in the Northwest. But Chris Marchand with the MNRF says they're not panicking yet, as a lot can change between now and the official start of the fire season in April.
We still have half the winter yet to go, so it is a bit early for us to really speculate on how this is going to affect the spring fire season. However, we will make arrangements to ensure that we are prepared to respond should that fire hazard occur before then. If we're still facing these warmer and drier weather patterns in the weeks ahead, you could see some actions taken to increase our resource capabilities if an early spring fire hazard calls for it.
The fire season is typically impacted by several different factors. Marchand says the amount of rain we get in the spring, how fast the snow melts, and the thawing of the forest floor all contribute to what we may see during the summer ahead. Wildfire activity doesn't usually pick up until early May. Marchand acknowledges the first few fires could come earlier this year if the snow-free conditions continue. Meanwhile, the MNRF has been busy hiring forest fire rangers for the upcoming summer.
Still open for applications in terms of fire rangers. That the deadline for those applications is April 15th. So if there's anybody out there who thinks that might be an interesting way to spend their summer, I would certainly encourage them to go to our website at ontario.ca/become a fire ranger and really have a look at what that opportunity entails.
Time now for another short break. When we come back, we'll be visiting the long-awaited new school in Bigtagong, Nishnawbe.
The kids, their reaction coming in to the school today was unbelievable.
It was an emotional day in Bigtagong, Nishnawbe last week as students set foot in their new elementary school for the first time. After many years of planning and construction, the opening of the brand new school was a big event for everyone in the Pic River community. Lee Noonan has the story.
Students at Birigang Nishnabek and Jikinomading started the school day at the old building for the last time before parading through the community to their new school. Education Director Lisa Mshano Korshen was herself a student and then a teacher at the old school.
Staff cried, community members cried because community members lined the roads on both sides. The kids, their reaction coming in to the school today was unbelievable. Like I expected them to be excited, but to hear it and see it there's no words to describe that.
Grade 7 student Jillian Anderson spent more than 8 years at the old school and says she's really excited to finish up her last years of elementary school in the new building.
I'm really excited to just make new memories with my friends and teachers and everybody else that's around.
Grade 6 student Liam Otaquam says it was really exciting to walk into his new school and new classroom for the first time.
I said, oh my God, this is so cool. Better than the other one. The other one was like kind of old and like the desks were crowded.
Grade 3 student Leighton Gagne says she loves her new classroom and she loves that the new school has a gym.
We always had to walk to the hall and we never had our own gym in school.
Having their own gym is a big deal for a lot of the students. For the adults, says Michano Korshen, it's more about breaking free from a traumatic history with the education system.
Trying to close that chapter, leave those things behind, and transition into a new school where, you know, we're no longer under the same people who put our people through some very horrific traumas in the guise of education. You know, it's a new world, it's a new change, it's a new chapter.
Although there's still some exterior work needed, Michano Korshen is thrilled to see the school finally up and running. She says the project took about 6 years and over $20 million to complete.
One thing that always is at the back of my mind is that every First Nation community should have the opportunity to have this for their kids.
Every kid we've spoken to here has said they love their new school. Lee Noonan,
TNT News. That's all for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Join us next time for more of the top stories from across the region.